Shadow Priest versus Quest Rogue. I'm Uncorrupt. I'm going to be breaking down the replay on hsreplay.net, explaining my thought process and why I'm making the choices that I'm making on each and every turn. Taking a look at the mulligan here, right off the bat I see that I'm against Rogue, and again I have to make an assumption about the deck that my opponent is playing. Quest Rogue is what I tend to face. I'm loosely aware that some people are playing Weapon Rogue, but I haven't really been seeing that, so I do assume, in fact, that my opponent is going to be playing Quest Rogue, and I'm going to realize that my assumption was correct on turn one. As you can see, our opponent's going first, and we're going to be on the coin. So, looking at the cards that I was presented for the mulligan here, I would never keep Raised Dead, I would never keep the Twilight Deceptor. I actually considered Cult Neophyte. What could this card do for me in terms of being able to disrupt my opponent playing spells. Ultimately, I decided to throw this away. Felt like we could potentially do just a little bit better. Our opponent's going to be playing potentially Swindle. Potentially, they're going to be playing Secret Passage, although that's much more likely to come down on, say, turn 3 or turn 4. And then, of course, there's SI Extortion, and just pushing that from 1 to 2 isn't really going to help us all that much. So you can actually see here that our opponent had Extortion in hand and put it back. So that's interesting. I would have been tempted to keep this in their position, but maybe they were expecting something more along the lines of Miracle Priest or, some type of Dragon Priest. The Trog, I didn't know if this was a keep or not. Ultimately, I decided to keep it just because 1 mana. I don't think it has a whole lot of value in the matchup against Quest Rogue. It's extremely unlikely that it's going to duplicate itself. And certainly with us going second, we can't play it on turn 1 and then just hope that they play the quest anyway to give us an extra copy of it. So I kept it because it was 1 mana. It's definitely important to just get a minion on the board. And then there's some potential upside here in case we possibly hit, say, like a Guardian Og Merchant to be able to protect it, make it a little bit more likely that it can duplicate itself. So as the game gets going here again, I'm going to realize pretty quickly here that my opponent is Quest Rogue. And I'm going to realize also that this is really just an unfavorable matchup. I think it's something like 60-40 in favor of the Quest Rogue. So really and realistically, I should be expecting to lose this. The most important thing here is that I want to make correct plays to give myself the best possible chance to win. And so that's really what I'm going to be focused on. But, your opponent is going to be able to remove things. Cutlass, I think, is a core card now, so you can expect that they're going to possibly have this card to be able to remove minions. Of course, Operatives, SI7 agents, Shadow Step is going to allow them to do some things. So Quest Rogue, just a really, really solid tempo deck, and it's going to be hard for us to maintain a board to be able to get the face damage we need to win. So again, just expecting to lose. You can see here, we ended up with Guardian Og Merchant, Void Touch Attendant in hand. Top deck Wriggling Horror here as well. So ultimately, I decide to just play the Trog and then protect it with the Guardian Og Merchant. This kind of maybe hedges our bets a little bit against the Swindle, or if there is a Extortion play, then, we're going to be able to get an extra copy of the Trog. Realistically, going into turn 2, probably what they want to see would be the SI Skulker, the 2/2 with Stealth. So I felt like if they play the Skulker, then, we can get 3 damage face. If they just have to hero power and hit this, then we do 2 damage face. We still have a Divine Shield here. So could have considered going Void Touch Attendant with the Guardian Og Merchant. That may have actually been the better play against Quest Rogue. So I'm not totally sure on that. It's possibly, close. But maybe a misplay right off the bat here from me. Void Touch Attendant. It does have the upside if you play it a little bit later with an existing board that you can get more damage in versus just like playing it on turn 1 and it dying a little bit sooner. So ultimately this was the play that I made. Going into our opponent's turn, we can see here they just equipped the Cutlass and they actually removed the Divine Shield on Iron Deep Trog. So this kind of tells me that, hey, my opponent might actually want to play a spell and they want to get this Trog off the board just so that it doesn't, create another copy of the Trog. So in my mind, I'm kind of expecting, maybe like a Foxy Broad Swindle type of play to be coming out from them on the other side. So you can see here, I just wanted to spend my mana, and I dropped the Peasant and the Void Touched Attendant. So now with the Attendant, we're going to get 2 extra damage off of these 2 cards attacking our opponent's face. And then I thought, you know, if they use the weapon attack to remove the Trog, which seemed like a priority for them last turn, then we still have the Peasant, which is going to get a draw, and we still have the Void Touch, which is going to be giving us extra damage every turn. So this just kind of cleanly spent all my mana. It felt stronger to do this than to play, say, Occult Neophyte or to buff. You know, if you buff with the Wriggling Horror, Iron Deep Trog still just dies to the weapon. And then if they have, say, like the SI Operative, then Og Merchant is also going to die. And this would go in stealth, even though it would just be a 2-1. So this felt like the strongest possible play I was going to be able to make. Just get extra bodies on the board, 2 bodies versus 1, with the upside of potentially drawing a card and having just the extra damage from Void Touched Attendant here. And then, of course, we send our minion damage face. Turn 3 for them, pretty straightforward. They play the Operative and decide to remove the Void Attendant because they don't want to take damage. I think that's a really great play from them, and certainly the correct play. If you don't remove Void Touched Attendant, the damage just tends to add up. The 1 card draw, they were comfortable with allowing us to have that. Again, I think it's the correct play. Unfortunate for them that we were able to get the card draw, but again, I think just good, solid, correct play from our opponent. They're advancing the quest, and they're staying as safe as they possibly can. So we can see here the top deck is Mankrik. Deciding here to play, forego the Mankrik for the moment, and deciding to just buff the cards that we have in play, and then get down the tour guide so that we can have the free hero power. So the free hero power, 2 damage, will allow us to potentially remove, you know, whatever our opponent has, or possibly, you know, generate a favorable trade for us. And then we're just taking the damage while we can get it with the Wriggling Horror to be able to go face. So again, just putting bodies in play, staying wide, hopefully being able to get that chip damage on our opponent's face versus just playing 1 minion out on the board. You know, it's going to be easier for our opponent to remove 1 minion, even though it has higher health, than it is for 2 minions on the board. So just continuing to take a consistent line, staying as wide as possible. You know, if we hit Raise Dead and we can get the Void Touched Attendant back, or second Void Touched, you know, just having bodies on board is going to end up being a lot of damage. So ultimately, that's the play we make. All damage goes face because we can't do anything else, even if we wanted to. We see going into our opponent's turn, just unfortunate for us at this point. They're able to make a trade with the Operative, then they can play Tenwu and make another trade, and then they can actually Shadow Step the Operative and even make a 3rd trade here, if that's what they decide to do. And they actually choose to play the Plunderer here, so the line that they took was actually even better than replaying the Operative. Being able to play the Plunderer, Shadow Step, play the Plunderer again, so really strong from their side of the board. 3 Shadow Step-like effects in their deck. They had access to 2 of them on turn 4, and just removing our board. So as I'm playing this game, you know, right now, mentally, I'm probably just a little bit salty. I mean, I can remember playing this game. I definitely was salty. First of all, because Prize Plunderer, I don't think this is a good card to have in Quest Rogue right now. Maybe not ever. Most of the time, it's just not going to be that great. Or rather, there's better cards that could be run in its place. So, worked out really well for our opponent here. And they were able just to remove so much of our board, get us down to just the little 1/1 token. So, definitely salty, but in my mind, I'm also thinking, okay, our opponent is not running an optimal deck list. And when your opponent is running a suboptimal deck list, expected win rate in the matchup is going to go up. So I'm hoping that maybe there's a chance, maybe our opponent's just playing some bad cards, but definitely a tough turn from our side, and our opponent is feeling better about the game now, even though they're at half health, sitting on just 15. So ended up just wanted to spend all my mana here. Going to trade with the hero power and get the 2 bodies on board. Also, this is going to you know, make something like a Secret Passage in hand really expensive. 3 mana Secret Passage, and then they only have 2 mana to spend whatever they have. So this felt like the strongest possible turn that I could make. Again, not a lot of options, simply because we don't have a whole lot of cards in our hand. And then just taking a trade here, trying to fight for board as hard as we can. So again, with Shadow Priest, we want to fight for the board. We need the board to be able to deal damage to our opponent's face. Against a deck like Tempo Rogue, realistically, I'm expecting at some point it's going to no longer be feasible to fight for the board. at which point we're going to want to start sending damage into our opponent's face and just let them finish removing our board. So at that point, we're going to be relying on like hero powers, Mr. Smite, Void Shard, and maybe even, say, the Defias Leper, if it's active, to be able to damage our opponent's face. So general game plan here, do as much damage as we can with our minions, and then eventually it's going to come to a point where we no longer have board. Hopefully they're low enough that we can finish them off. You can see here our opponent plays another operative, and then they're just going to be making trades. So now we have no board, and they have this minion, and then they're going to dagger up, and looks like they actually punch us in the face here. So not very many cards on the other side of the board. Unfortunately, one of the cards for them is going to be the Secret Passage. Here, I just play the Mankrik and shoot the damage face. Potentially could be a misplay on my side. If we happen to draw a Shadow spell, this gives us 2 extra damage. It likely could have been better to just get the Defias Leper in play as a body, but it would also give them an easy trade with the operative. So ultimately I decided to hold on to the Leper. Didn't really just want to throw it out just to die, and then maybe I can get some value out of it. But again, possibly a misplay, could be close. I think I feel comfortable with the line that was taken here, though. And then you can see they're able to Noggin Fogger this, which is going to give them a good trade on the Mankrik. And Oil Rig Ambusher. So when this card came out, now I'm even more salty and even more hopeful about, you know, what's going to potentially happen in the game here. So they choose to Secret Passage rather than just play the SI7 agent that was in their hand, and they actually hit this Oil Rig Ambusher nonsense. I've never seen this card played in a single game of Hearthstone. I didn't know what it did. I don't know what set it came from. I had to read the text. Deal 2 damage, entered your hand this turn, deal 4. So they get 4 damage out of this, and instead of having to trade this body, they're able to remove my Mankrik with damage from Oil Rig Ambusher. So at this point, again, I'm just really salty here, and kind of wondering what shenanigans my opponent is up to with some of these inclusions in their deck. Just super weird. This card is bad. It shouldn't be in their deck, but fortunately for them and unfortunately for me, this is just kind of the way that it worked out. And while I'm in the game, I'm having to remind myself it's a 60-40 matchup. This is the way the matchup goes. If it wasn't Oil Rig Ambusher, it just would have been something else. But just the fact that it's a card that shouldn't be in the deck in the first place, really starts to affect me mentally. So I'm kind of a little bit down about the game, in addition to being unfavored. So speaking about the mental aspect, you always have to try to keep your center mentally to make sure that you're making the correct plays. And an unfavored matchup, you have to make correct play to have any chance of being able to. In a matchup like this, again, I think it's somewhere around 60-40. So important to just try to stay focused. If you get too excited, either one way or the other, positive or negative, it can make it hard to make correct plays. And, even low on resources in hand, there's still correct and incorrect plays. Top deck, Benedictus. Benedictus goes into play immediately. Let the record show this is actually Diamond Benedictus. Yes, it makes a difference. The diamond art is just absolutely. And then you can see that our opponent responds. Again, just a little bit unfortunate here. Top deck Shadow Step. They're able to Shadow Step this nonsense card again. 4 damage there. And then they play the SI7 agent. So super clean. They clear our board. And, they have a nice, healthy board. So again, at this point, it's just not feasible for me to be able to fight for the board. I can't take this board. I have no resources in hand. And unfortunately, our opponent is still at 13 health. So, feels like they've stabilized on a health total that we're just not going to be able to touch them. At this point, as I'm playing the game, I'm thinking, this game is over. You could probably even consider conceding. I like to play the game out because in Hearthstone, things can happen, situations can happen. And then also, our opponent has no cards in hand, so this has kind of turned into a top deck war. And then you can see they stealth the operative here. So top deck is Twilight Deceptor. So this is actually a decent top deck for us. We can hero power face, which is likely what we're going to be doing every turn anyway, just trying to get them down into a health total where we can kill them. We're also going to draw a shadow spell, and it's going to activate the leper here. So we draw Thrive in the Shadows. That's actually probably the best draw that we could have gotten. And then, of course, with Thrive in the Shadows, we're going to pull out Mankrick's Hatred. A lot of people call it Wife. Another 3 damage face. This sets our opponent to 8. Our board is actually pretty reasonable now. We went from having no hope on the board to, hey, actually we have hope here, and I'm glad that I didn't concede. You know, they have to put more than 1 minion in to kill this. So, you know, the trades could be like these 2 guys go here, or rather, you know, the 6-1 and the 3-3, and then trade like this. This would then be at 2 health. It actually feels pretty good also knowing that my opponent is going to have to top deck here. So I'm starting to feel like, hey, there's a chance that we could potentially win this. Not in a super awful position. Top deck Swindle, again, I was just happy to see that. It's not comboed, so they're only going to be drawing a spell. And they actually hit Extortion. That's good. It advances the quest for them and allows them to make a trade on the Mankrik here. So again, just kind of looking at this now, we're at 10 health, but I still feel like the game is in reach. You know, we can hero power this, we can remove this. That'll leave them with only 3 power on the board. Then we can raise dead to get some resources back in hand. So at this point, it still feels like a winnable game, even though it's just a tough, unfavored matchup for us. Top deck Peasant, you know, that wasn't great. So I'm going to just remove the minions and play the raise dead and play the minions that come out. So I'm actually able to play everything. So I just remove as much as I can from the board here. So now, again, it feels like a winnable game. I've played everything. They may not be able to remove both peasants, which would mean that I actually get 2 draws when I start my turn next turn. I think, you know, at least 1 draw. I would assume that there's going to be some kind of trade or removal on one of these peasants. But again, it just starts to look like, hey, maybe we can actually win this. Depending on what they top deck, you know, we could just have lethal from board with the damage that we have available here. So, still feels like a winnable game at this point. And then, unfortunately, our opponent top decks Scabs. Again, this is another card that shouldn't be in the deck. It's not good in Quest Rogue. After the nerf now, it's just a little bit too expensive. Nobody's playing it except this one person that I happen to run into. And of course, when they play the Scabs, the game is just over. They gain 5 health. They get the agent back in hand that they're going to be able to replay thanks to the hero power, and they get the 4-2. So at this point, I realize the game is just over. I'm on 3 health. I can't impact the stealth minions that are on the board, and I actually just go ahead and concede at this point. So there were definitely a couple of turns in there, and looking at the replay, I kind of wonder if I made the right turn. Was holding on to the Void Touch Attendant on turn 1 the correct play rather than just getting it out on the board. I think there may have been 1 or 2 other turns that I kind of mentioned. Didn't know if I exactly took the correct line. After watching the entire replay, I do think I made plays that gave myself the best possible chance of winning. And quite honestly, if they didn't top deck the Scabs there, or if they just didn't play Scabs, had a realistic chance of being able to kill them on the following turn. Again, just trying to keep in mind, I was definitely salty playing the game. The Oil Rig Ambusher, again, just nonsense. I don't think that the Prize Plunderer is a good inclusion, and our opponent, of course, having 2 Shadow Step effects on turn 4 to be able to replay the Prize Plunderer and the, I believe it was an Operative that was replayed. So it felt unfortunate, but, you know, mentally, I'm just trying to tell myself, this is an unfavored matchup. If it wasn't those cards being played against me, it would have been different cards, but it would have been the same outcome. Thank you for watching. Good luck out on the ladder. If you enjoy this style of video, definitely hit me up in the comments. See you next time.